What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Today I want to brush over the importance of something that doesn't really get talked about that much, and it is space and how it affects fights, as well as using the concept to create choke points. Let's get started. Now it kind of goes without saying, but space in League is pretty much just the area you have all around you. Some areas you'll have a lot of space, like when you're in lane, and others you will have a lot less space, like when you're in the jungle. Things like walls and bushes really limit space overall. Now in general, there are two different kinds of space: aggressive space in front of you and defensive space behind you. Space influences three major things in fights: initiations, kiting, and positioning. For initiations, they're simply just not possible if you don't have enough aggressive space. You can't go in if you have no space to work with because your opponent will be able to disengage very easily. You need room to chase a little bit, or at least have enough space to deal a reasonable amount of damage before the fight ends. For kiting, it's not really possible without any defensive space. You'll get damaged really heavily and will get easily collapsed on if you don't have any defensive space to work with. And lastly, positioning is really just all about how much defensive and aggressive space you have in relation to your opponents, if you kind of think about it. Now, a key thing to understand with space is something that I call a safe area, which is one of the biggest influences when it comes to space. A safe area is really just a spot where your opponents will not be able to fight you in. It can take many forms, but the most common one, and example I will use, is towers during the laning phase. Generally, a tower is a safe area because your opponent, most of the time at least, will not be able to fight you under it. The key thing to understand is that space can be measured in relation to a safe area. If you're pushed in and really close to the tower, but not under it, the opponent's aggressive space does not really go past the direct range of their champions. This means that they have almost zero initiation potential on you. On the other hand, if you're pushed up and near the opponent's tower, starting a fight that is not a tower dive is basically impossible since you have no aggressive space. On the contrary, your opponent has loads of aggressive space when you're pushed up like that. And although you do have a lot of defensive space, aggressive space almost always outweighs defensive space in fights, especially in lane. And the reason for this is because when you have too much defensive space between yourself and a safe area, disengaging from a fight becomes really difficult if the opponent has a reasonable amount of chase potential onto you. This is the key factor that pushing a lane has in terms of fighting in lane. When you push in your lane, you give up your aggressive space in exchange for pressure and poke. Fighting becomes pretty much impossible with the exception of small trades and some poke here and there. So on a champion that you are trying to all in with, pushing the lane will almost always be a bad idea. For teamfights, safe areas can be a little bit more difficult to come by, and are often simply created by your team protecting you instead of a turret or something like that. And this leads me into my next point, which is controlling space and choke points. Now, a choke point is an area where the opponent has little to no defensive space. It's where they have no room to kite, making disengaging impossible and creating picks in that location very easy, since aggressive space will still be abundant. The most common choke points take place in the jungle. With all of the walls surrounding in the area, it's really difficult to kite effectively in the jungle, since defensive space is really lacking. Other choke points on the map do take place where there is little space and walls nearby. One example of a common choke point on the map is in between the very outside of the Wraith camp and the wall that borders the river bush in mid lane. That area is really tight and has pretty much no space to kite, making it extremely dangerous to walk through, just like any other choke point. Now, you can create choke points with your team through the tactic of flanking. A flank that is followed up by someone on the other side creates a choke point because the enemy becomes surrounded and then they have no direction to kite in. Flanks that happen in the jungle often mean pretty much instant death, since disengage, kiting, and pretty much any other method of escaping becomes essentially impossible. And so by controlling space, you can create choke points, catch out your opponents, and pick up some easy kills. And that just about wraps it up. My name is Jeremy, and that's it for my video on space and choke points. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button so I can tell, and be sure to check me out over on all the socials, of which you can see on your screen. And if you really enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe for some more awesome content in the future, or check out some of my other videos on your screen as well. And above all else, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. This video was sponsored by Vulcan. Fantasy draft the LCS for money and win big. Or play for free and win some pocket change. Use the code GamingCurios to support me, and Vulcan will match all deposits you make up to $1,000.